What I'm going to discuss here is what the best camera is for you. So let's look at camera specifically. I'm going to discuss the three major camera options out there and help you make a decision about which one is the best to buy for yourself. Now, the camera is essentially just something that gathers and records light. It gathers information about how much light there is and the actual color of that light. I know you're hearing me say phone cameras at the start, and you might be thinking, no way, I'm not using a phone camera. The truth is that phone cameras have come on a really long way, and I do actually see them on professional sets these days as like a third or fourth camera, especially for video. But of course, they do have a few major limitations. The first one, and the major one for me, is that you can't easily adapt lenses for them. And that means that if I need to zoom in with the camera, there are two options. I can either zoom with my feet, or I can pinch and zoom in, which is a digital method of zooming. And the problem is with that is that we lose resolution and the image looks worse. Now, I know many modern cameras have up to 3 lenses, which it does offer us a bit more flexibility. The next problem with phones and cameras is they have a very small sensor size. And the sensor is the part of the camera that actually gathers the light. And the smaller the sensor is, the lower quality the image that it creates. Further to this, even with modern advancements, they do have a lot of issues in low light, though there are apps that give you lots of manual control. They don't give you enough precise control to be as good as a traditional camera. And often the look that they give is a really digital, grainy look. And the benefits of a phone camera are obvious. You already have one, they're pretty cheap, they're very versatile, they're small and they're portable. So if we're using a camera, so if you're going to be using a camera for professional purposes and you know you're going to be using one regularly, then I would definitely recommend investing in a professional camera. 20, 30 years ago, to get a professional level camera was the price of a small car. That is no longer the case. Okay, so let's talk about the two camera options that there are. There are DSLR and mirrorless. It's pretty implicit in the name that one of them is without a mirror, and you probably guessed the other one has a mirror. The way a DSLR camera works is that it has a mirror built into the construction of the body. And what that enables the camera to do is take light that comes in through the lens and shine it up into a viewfinder. So when you look through the viewfinder at the top of the camera, what you can see is an image of the real world reflected off a mirror. Now, the difference with the DSLR and the mirrorless being that the image in the viewfinder of a mirrorless camera is digital. There's no mirror there. Now there's a benefit and a trade-off of each. Removing the mirror from the camera has made them a lot smaller, more portable, and lighter. But it has come at the cost of the image that comes into the viewfinder being worse. When there are low light conditions, when lighting conditions are low, the image that's produced in the viewfinder is often very, very grainy, except in some of the best modern cameras. Most major camera brands have actually now stopped producing DSLR cameras and almost exclusively produce mirrorless. So you might be thinking, okay, that's not an option, but actually lots of the old cameras are still compatible with the latest modern lenses. And further to that, they're incredibly cheap. If you're doing photography only, I would really recommend looking at DSLR as an option over buying mirrorless, just for the cost savings. So the next aspect we're going to talk about is camera brands. In truth, there really isn't a lot to pick in between camera brands. Some brands have better options in terms of the lenses that they offer, and some maybe are a little bit cheaper. Generally, each major brand offers a camera at a particular pricing point, and the other brands offer cameras at a similar pricing point that offer basically the same level of features. When it comes to deciding the camera brand that you want, something that's really important is that you actually enjoy using it. I have 2 cameras, and one's my commercial camera that I use for my work, and I have a very different camera that I use for my everyday, for when I'm actually going out and taking pictures. And it's because that second camera, though it isn't great for commercial work, is just a joy to use. And that is a value that's a real value that you can't overlook when choosing the actual camera itself. So let's talk about what actually matters when it comes to buying a new camera. As a photographer, the most important thing is the sensor side. Now, the sensor is the part of the camera that actually gathers the light. And if we have a larger sensor, it means that the individual pixels that gather light are larger in a larger sensor. As a result, they gather more signal than they do noise. As a result, they produce a more clear and accurate image. So there are 3 major sensor sizes that you can expect to encounter. The smallest being micro four thirds. The second is 35mm or full frame. That's probably the most common and the most common industry standard camera. And then the third is the larger medium format frame. Micro four thirds cameras may be a few $100s to nearly $1,000. Full frame cameras could be in the high hundreds to the several thousand. And medium format cameras are likely going to be 5,000 plus. So the more money we spend to get a larger sensor, generally the better the quality of image that we get. but we don't need to spend all of that money because we're probably okay with just full frame. So let's talk about actually what the best way to spend your money is when you're coming to buying a camera. Now, if you're someone that knows you're going to be working in a studio most of the time, potentially with a camera on a tripod, or you're taking pictures of people with artificial lighting, and you know you're mostly going to be doing photography and not videography, I would really recommend investing your money on a full frame camera and just get an old used DSLR. Now, I know that doesn't sound like the sexiest way to spend the money, but the truth is that there just hasn't been that large of an increase in image quality in the past 10 years for photography cameras. So as a beginner, you might as well just get the thing that's going to deliver on what it is that you need and save the money to spend elsewhere. Now, alternatively, if you are someone that knows that you need a more technical camera, potentially you're going to be photographing wildlife or sports, you are likely going to need to invest in a more advanced camera. Look for a camera that has a high shutter speed and one that performs well in low light. My final piece of advice for anyone that's buying a camera is to buy used. I have had my camera for nearly 10 years now. I've had no issues other than ones that I've caused it myself. And I suspect it will go on for a pretty long period after this. They last an incredibly long time, and brand new cameras depreciate pretty quickly. If you're buying it as a business decision, you want something that doesn't lose value quickly. So I would really strongly recommend just buying used camera. So just a quick recap. So we had a look at mobile phones and we discussed whether or not using a mobile phone over a camera is worth investing in. What I would say is if you're just going to use it for social media posts and stories like that, I wouldn't recommend getting a camera. But if you're expecting to use a camera every single day for professional purposes, or if you're trying to demonstrate products or people, you're going to need a camera. The next thing we discussed is the importance of camera brands and the truth that they aren't very important. They're just like any other brand. It's the product that matters, really. After that, we discussed DSLR versus mirrorless. DSLR is a great option if you're only going to use it for photography. If you don't need any of the latest features, because you'll be able to save a lot of money. If you are expecting to need a lot of the latest features because you might be working in more complicated conditions, for example, photographing sports or animals, then you might want to invest in a better mirrorless camera. And then one of the final things that we discussed is the 3 different sensor sizes: micro four thirds, full frame, and medium format. And my recommendation that you should probably go for a full format camera.